What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Spectator Sports. I'm your host, Sebastian Fonseca. Before we get into episode number 88, let's do some housekeeping. If you're new to the channel, please like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. We've just hit 100 subscribers, so happy about this goal. Let's go ahead and get to the next 100. But to do that, we need your help. And additionally, if you like clips from this podcast, you can get it on TikTok and Instagram, plus in our playlist here on YouTube. And the entire audio from this podcast you can get on Spotify. All links are in the description. The conference championships are set, and we have to break down all the divisional round action. Let's start off with the Buffalo Bills taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. This is the first time that Patrick Mahomes has to travel outside of Arrowhead for a playoff game. This time, it's the most hostile environment that you can think of, at least because this fan base in Bills Mafia, they're wild. They love their quarterback in Josh Allen, and they just want to prove to the entire world that their guy is just as good as the guy in red. However, yes, like any other circumstance that we've seen between the Bills and Chiefs when they play in the playoffs, that the Bills come up short. In their previous two matchups, both at Arrowhead, the Chiefs just had that extra gear. And what I was worried about for the Bills is just, one, their injuries, and also that they haven't been able to prove that they can get it done in close moments that the Chiefs have done. The Chiefs have been this team. They've been there. They've done that. This is their sixth consecutive AFC Championship appearance that they'll be making next week. All of those that come in Arrowhead, I mean, they have so many players that have been there. Andy Reid is one of the best head coaches of all time. Patrick Mahomes is ascending into GOAT status. It's just so hard when those little nuances and those situations that you've been there so many times, they come into these situations. And the Chiefs, yet again, made more plays than the Bills did. This matchup feels like Brady, Manning, and in that early part of that rivalry, it was all Brady. It took up until their first matchup where they went to Indianapolis, where Peyton Manning finally beat Tom Brady in a playoff game. But when you fast forward to what we have now, Patrick Mahomes has been able to take it to the road as well. We thought maybe it's just because he's playing at Arrowhead. Nope, not the case at all. And in so many cases, it feels also like this could be LeBron's Cavs against the Toronto Raptors of the late 2010s. Remember that so many times those two teams went head-to-head, and with the exception of that one Eastern Conference Finals in 2016, LeBron and the Cavs swept the Toronto Raptors. Every time that they would go up against these LeBron James-led Cavaliers, no matter how good those Raptors teams were, they would fall short. It was just a simple choke job. And this probably was the first time the Bills had a better team. They had a better offense, balanced attack, and their defense was just as good as the Kansas City Chiefs. And the fact that we've talked about this all year long, the Chiefs' outside guys haven't been able to step up to the plate. But the fact is that they still have Patrick Mahomes. He had a few extra plays, and let's break down some key instances where I think the Bills really messed up on. The first one, in the fourth quarter, when you have that lead and the defense is, I wouldn't say unraveling, but they just gave way to the ground game in Isaiah Pacheco. That ground game just wears on you, it leans on you, and allowed the go-ahead score. You decide to go with a fake punt, and it's on 4th and 5, and that's deep in your territory. If this is at midfield and it was a 4th and 3 situation, I would be far more comfortable with doing this fake punt. But the fact that it's inside your own 35 and you're running with Lamar, Hamlin, so many things could go awry. 5 yards is a lot of ground to cover. The fact is that came up short, and they were very nearly put on the brink of elimination. If they go down and score, this game is over and the Chiefs cruise to a victory. But following that, we got this controversial play yet again, that a play goes out the back of the end zone, and that's where we'll talk about it a little bit later, but that did momentarily save the Bills. You're going down the field, you have a chance yet again to get a tie or go ahead and take the lead, and the Bills are doing everything right, milking clock, and you have the ball inside the Bills, when you have the ball inside the Chiefs' 25-yard line with under 2 minutes to go. Unfortunately, you try to go for it all, and this is where Josh Allen gets a little bit greedy. He has this massive arm, and there are some times where he can fit balls into tight pockets or he can launch it deep. We saw that with the Stephon Diggs bomb that he dropped, another miscue by the Bills, and he's just trying to hit Shakir when he has Diggs on that drag route. This didn't go the way he needed to. Third down, again, just nothing there. Stops the clock both times, and I feel like if anything, you just need a high percentage short pass. You got 2nd and 9, get a 5-yard pass, make it 3rd and 4, 3rd and medium, you have something to work with. And then also, Josh, it's probably better that he maybe just goes down at the line of scrimmage, just bleed out more clock, and then that sets up everything that we know. Tyler Bass's missed kick wide right. The two most traumatizing words in Bills Mafia, wide right. He's channeling his Scott Norwood. I mean, immediately these fans are in heartbreak. I feel for Bills Mafia. I mean, you think you have it, at least a chance to get into overtime. I mean, there's still a decent amount of time, and that's Patrick Mahomes. But this was your best shot. Now, let's just talk about what's next for the Bills. This is now heading into 2024. Josh Allen's contract balloons to $40+ million. And that probably means that we're not going to see the same core of Bills players again. I'm going to say that Sean McDermott is back. That's a guarantee because he's righted the ship. But this team has dropped off, and they had opportunity. No Joe Burrow, a weakened Chiefs team, and basically their chance to get into the AFC Championship game. But like I said, the best version of the Bills that we've seen in this Bills-Chiefs meetups is still not enough to beat Patrick Mahomes. We can talk about the injuries, but another thing is that Stephon Diggs may not be back. He has a $19 million cap hit, and just for a receiver that's 30, he can do all the routes. That's very clear, but he's been disgruntled about his contract. He's been a little bit of an off-the-field drama-centric person. I mean, I don't think there's anything absolutely wrong, nothing illegal, but it is a distraction. We had issues of this in training camp, but he showed up, had a pretty solid year, but his numbers were down. And just like typical what we've seen when Bill Belichick was the coach of the New England Patriots, he knows when to get rid of players before they have that complete spiral downwards and your value is little to nothing. I do think, though, the Bills, as long as they have Josh Allen, they're going to be in the neighborhood of making the playoffs and being a second round type of team, but it's been a long time since they even made the AFC Championship game. It hasn't happened since 2020, and the issue is that Josh Allen is great in the regular season, but there are times in the postseason that he hasn't been able to come up strong. He has a 5-5 record, and the wins haven't been that impressive. I mean, he's beaten Mac Jones, Skylar Thompson, he beat an aging Phillip Rivers. The win against Lamar Jackson was when Lamar was knocked out of the fourth quarter, and then Mason Rudolph last week. A lot of 1-1s, and just had opportunities to do better, but didn't. And so many of those losses came to Patrick Mahomes, but also Joe Burrow. This team simply has hit their wall. I feel like their window was closing last year, and now with just this cap money issue, it's probably going to close for a little bit. They're going to need to retool. Just the way the salary cap is made out, it's going to be very hard for these Bills to return to what they could have been, and I'm afraid they missed their shot at a title. We talked about the pivotal play where Mecole Hardman had a chance to score, but he fumbled and the ball went out of the back of the end zone. And this rule has been subject to high-powered debates in countless football media outlets. Some are very adamant in keeping the rule, some are not. They say, why reward a defense that forces the fumble, but they made no clear recovery, and that's rewarding the defense, but costing the offense yardage and points. Now, in any part of the field of play, if this fumble were to happen, let's say at midfield, the ball goes out of bounds, it goes back to the offense on where the point the ball was fumbled. But remember that the end zone is sacred ground. That is 6 points, a touchdown, the highest amount of points you can get on any single score. You have to handle the ball with care. You can't just handle it loosey-goosey as you're heading towards the pylon and lose possession. You know how like the out of bounds or the sidelines is the extra defender because you want to push your offensive guy out of bounds or force them out? Well, in a way, the end zone is another defender. And maybe that is something slightly unfair to the offense, but look how recently things have trended toward offense. The hand grabbing, the PI, no contact beyond 5 yards, is helping out receivers break out of jams and getting away from players that are downfield in the secondary. Then all of these quarterback rules: no hits below the knee, no hits up high, head to head for receivers coming across the middle. And now with that, we're seeing hits low, and I'm sure that the hip drop tackle is another thing that they're going to take away. But I understand there's a safety aspect with this, but this has nothing to do with safety. It is simply just a lot of people not being happy about the rule. And I understand if your team falls subject to this, and it happens at a very pivotal point, it sucks. It is an unfortunate consequence. But simple as that, the immediate solution to that is just don't fumble. Don't fumble. Because I don't know what necessarily you could do to replace it. If you simply give it back to the offense, that's one thing, but then there's so many other little nuances that can happen. My thing now is that we'll wait and see what this rule actually happens and if it remains the same or is completely wiped out after the season concludes. The 49ers, they win ugly, but they win. And for much of this game, I felt like Green Bay had them on the ropes. They looked like the superior team. Their running game with Aaron Jones was great. Jordan Love was great after that phenomenal performance against the Dallas Cowboys in the wild card round. But when the second half rolled around, you just knew that some of these issues that they had in the first half, keeping the 49ers in the game, were maybe going to come back to bite them, because in that first half, there was a fourth down call when they used the tush-push brotherly shove play. It was ruled short. Now that's subject to some controversy because it looked like maybe he did break that first down marker line, but they held it up as short. And there's so many other little missed opportunities. Second half, 2 interceptions, the one that ended the game, and the missed field goal by Anders Carlson. Really, this can't happen, but these are things that are subject to teams that have younger roster. This rookie kicker isn't the most consistent. I mean, even Matt LaFleur went on the record apparently saying that he has to wish and pray for this kick to get through the uprights. You know, it is what it is, and it is late in the season to make a change at that such important position. However, my whole problem though with this is this, that they get assigned to do one job, and just like Tyler Bass, he is only assigned to kick touchbacks and kick field goals. You don't have to really tackle, you don't have to really do anything else, just kick. Conditions for this, not the best, rainy. But inside 45 yards, I mean, there are kickers kicking it from 55 yards and hitting the back of the net. Same thing with 60-yard kicks these days. It's just unfortunate, bad timing, and this gave the Niners a chance to win the game. It felt like that air was sucked out of the Packers' sails, and when they needed to, Brock Purdy being not so great in inclement weather, something we saw in that Cleveland Browns game earlier, but he got the job done. A couple of great throws. Yes, he got help from Ayuk. Yes, he got help from Jennings, but he is still a guy that piloted the game-winning drive. He got them inside the 5-yard with a nice QB scramble. But it's definitely clear that he has some deficiencies, and they came out in this game, and the offensive game plan absolutely changed once Deebo Samuel was knocked out of the game with that shoulder injury. He's had issues with injuries in the past, and that's really derailed 49ers season in addition to their lack of quarterback play. But when Deebo isn't there, you have a guy that can get into the box to try and contain Christian McCaffrey. You can double Brandon Ayuk. You can use and take your chances with George Kittle across the middle. But that just means that there's one less set of eyeballs that are on Debo, and that means that they can deploy those eyeballs and that body to somebody else on this 49ers offense. If Debo isn't available, I certainly question whether or not the 49ers have a shot to win it, but I do expect him to play. There's no way that he wouldn't miss this game. It's just a matter of how effective he can be. If Debo isn't able to suit up next week, I'm certainly concerned for the 49ers, but I do expect him to suit up in some capacity. It's just a question of how effective is he going to be. We don't know. There's going to be a long time because they did get that extra day of rest. That's certainly helpful for Debo's condition, and they do have the late game compared. So that's just additional time. We don't know exactly what it holds, but there is just something that this 49ers team can do. They've been able to win ugly. They can blow out teams, and now they host the NFC Championship game, and they're just one win, and they're just one win away from Super Bowl 58. The Detroit Lions are heading to the NFC Championship game, but they did so by getting rid of these pesky Buccaneers. The Bucs have been gritty, they've been strong, they're very similar to what the Detroit Lions have, but at this moment, it's maybe just Detroit's time. The Bucs have such an experienced roster. They're just 3 years removed from a Super Bowl. And I mean, let's give a shout out to Mike Evans. Mike Evans is Mr. Consistent. Every year, he'll give you 1,000 yards receiving. And I mean, just look at these catches he's making in traffic, contended catches, highly contested catches, just balled out. And I just don't know if he's going to remain a Buccaneer. Could be that he's on the move just given his age, but still is getting the job done at and a very effective clip. One of the best years I've seen Mike Evans play. He's consistently just breaking open, knows how to run routes, physical with catching the ball. I don't know how much more he has left in the tank. He certainly looks like he does, but whoever he goes with next year, whether it's with the Bucs or some other team, they're going to be lucky to have him. But back to this whole divisional matchup, it's clear Detroit has something special here. When it's a day that Jared Goff was solid, but not as good as he was in week 1 of the playoffs, now the ground game got going. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs, that pick that they used, some people question it, but he is so effective. Going to be the back of the future, so lightning quick. I mean, look at the stiff arm he did on first team All-Pro Antoine Winfield as he's going into the end zone. Brutal. He has a little bit of power, but certainly more about a speed guy. David Montgomery is that power guy between the tackles, and then they just have so many weapons. And the fact that Sam Laporta, I mean, he is really looking like a true Pro Bowl tight end. And now they're just one win away from the Super Bowl going up against the San Francisco 49ers. The Ravens were tied at halftime with the Houston Texans, and people were a little nervous in M&T Bank Stadium, to say the least. They allowed this special teams touchdown and really couldn't extend this lead and create separation against a team that has really house money that they're playing with right now. But that second half proved why they're number 1 seed, why they're the best team in football, because they have that extra gear. This team got after it. They shut down the Texans offense for much of the game, and the ground game wore down Houston's defense. We know that DeMeco Ryans is a defensive guru, and he tried everything. He threw the kitchen sink and decided to blitz a little bit more, but Lamar is just so electric, so elusive, that he got in for 2 rushing touchdowns, 4 total on the day. And the Ravens are hosting their first ever AFC Championship game. It's been a phenomenal year for the Houston Texans, and they will be a team that will threaten them in the future. But right now, it's just the Ravens' time. Lamar responded after that shaky first half, and for the first time ever, he is going to the AFC Championship game where he will meet Patrick Mahomes, but this time in his building. The conference championships are next week, and the first matchup we need to break down is Chiefs-Ravens. These two guys have gone head-to-head a few times in the regular season, with Lamar having a 1-3 record against Patrick Mahomes. Now, these things have changed. The rosters are different. And I think this is Lamar's best shot to beat Patrick Mahomes and get to the Super Bowl. Now, these Chiefs, certainly dangerous. With that guy, number 15, he can break your back with scramble plays, Houdini acts. But it really comes down to this defense. I think this is the toughest defense that Patrick Mahomes will face since maybe the 2020 Buccaneers. That team that played him, now Mahomes was injured and that offensive line was a patchwork job. This offensive line is much better, but the pass catchers are just as bad in that Super Bowl matchup where they had the case of the yips, the drops. Not as much talented. It's really just Travis Kelce, and the Ravens have an elite back seven. They have Patrick Queen, they have Roquan Smith, one of the best linebacker duos that they have in this league, and then the secondary is just so lethal. They could get back Marlon Humphrey as well, just adding another body to guard these receivers and make Mahomes really scramble and try to make things with his legs and buy times, because as much as we like the secondary, they can only stick to their receivers for so long. However, this offense that they have, this running game, their formula has to be possess the ball. That magic number to win most ball games in time of possessions, if you get more than 35 minutes and you have a neutral or positive turnover margin, you probably win that game. If they do that, I feel like Baltimore will be able to grind down this Chiefs team, and they will make enough plays on defense, maybe not turnovers, but stops. Empty possessions, keeping Mahomes on the sideline would be great to stop and get the Ravens to the Super Bowl. This is the first time this team as a franchise is hosting the AFC Championship game. They hosted it back in the day when they were the Colts, but as the Ravens, this is their first time. And I really do think that this is the Ravens' time. This is Lamar's time to prove that he is just right up there with Patrick Mahomes as one of those best quarterbacks in this league. And I'm picking the Baltimore Ravens to go to Super Bowl 58 in Las Vegas. The Lions make their first NFC Championship game appearance since 1992. And they're going up against the San Francisco 49ers, a team that's made it 3 years in a row, fourth trip in the last 5 years. But they haven't won it all. Kyle Shanahan is going to be under a lot of pressure to deliver. And Detroit Lions, they're playing with house money. No one expected them to be here. And it's a really good matchup of two teams that have similar styles, especially offensively. Kyle Shanahan has been one of the best offensive minds in this league, and a lot of his concepts are getting copycatted across the board. And his favorite toy, Deebo Samuel, is banged up coming into this game, but he does have Christian McCaffrey to take some pressure off of Brock Purdy, who did look a little shaky in that divisional round matchup against the Green Bay Packers. But I think what we see so far with Brock is enough to say that as long as the conditions are ideal, this guy will make enough plays, especially when it comes down to clutch situations. However, that defense has given me cause to pause because they did get shredded for much of that game against Jordan Love. Now, they made some adjustments, but he did get fairly up and down the field, especially when the pace accelerated in that second half. Jared Goff isn't the most elusive quarterback in this league, so those defensive linemen will have an easier day trying to get him on the ground. But the question is, can he get the ball out quick to those receivers? I believe he will do so. He has had very good last couple of weeks. Ball has been getting out under 3 seconds or so consistently, and this offensive line is going to be the toughest test for San Francisco when they go up against tough offensive lines that are just so deep, especially with Penei Sewell and Rugnow, for example. Those guys are their anchors of that O-line to give Jared Goff time to get open and also pave lanes for their dual-headed running attack with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, who had that phenomenal touchdown run last week. Detroit has figured things out offensively, and it's just a question of how they can match with San Francisco. I know that San Francisco has more firepower, but if Deebo Samuel, who I believe will suit up, isn't at 100% or even 70%, it's just another opportunity for Detroit to take away some attention from Deebo and use that on doubling Ayuk, getting another man in the box to limit Christian McCaffrey's damage or bracket George Kittle. And that means that there's a fewer options for Brock Purdy to go with when it comes down to when they have the ball offensively. Their defense has some guys. I mean, CJ Gardner-Johnson came up with the pick last week. Aiden Hutchinson, their excellent defensive end. And I think at all three phases, they're not excellent in any category, but they are very sound and very well head coached. Detroit is going to be, I think, San Francisco's toughest test in this NFC playoffs, and I would love to pick Detroit. Heart says it. I'm rooting for Detroit if I had a say in this, but head says San Francisco. They have been head and shoulders the best team in the NFC on a consistent basis, despite some hiccups here and there. I only think the team that really exposed them was the Baltimore Ravens, and they could meet them in the Super Bowl. But in the NFC, Detroit may be the team of the future, but their time may not be there just yet. And I think this is finally the year that San Francisco returns to the Super Bowl for the first time in 4 years. It was a busy week in the NBA, and the Nuggets have started their East Coast road trip. Started off on a bad note with them getting shredded by the Philadelphia 76ers. Joel Embiid has had another excellent performance against his rival head-to-head, but did acknowledge that Nikola Jokic is the best player in this league, and a chance to redeem themselves against the toughest place to play right now in TD Garden in Boston. They gave the Boston Celtics their first loss all year. The fact that they have what they can do on offense, two guys that can give you 30, Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, those two combined for 69 points. So well coached. And the fact that Nikola Jokic is playing chess when people are playing checkers. Look at this head fake that he does to bait Jaylen Brown into a lane violation that effectively ended the game. I love this. I think this is extraordinary basketball. And for years, this was this guy who is lumpy. He doesn't do much athletically. And this team is boring. Small market team. But Denver plays a fun style of basketball, and I hope more people can get on board to it. They did burst onto the scene with this championship last year, and I still think that they're one of the best teams in the West because they just replicated it. They destroyed what's left of the Wizards, and Nikola Jokic had a 42-point game on Sunday. I don't think anyone outside of the Boston Celtics really worries me in the East when it matches up with these Denver Nuggets. Maybe Milwaukee, but Milwaukee has some problems so far. Out West, Minnesota and OKC both look great in the regular season. But remember, the playoffs are a different animal. Anthony Edwards, I think in what he's done so far, has been monumental in his next step in his evolution as the lead guy for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has taken steps forward. He looks unstoppable. And these two may be budding rivals for the years to come. But it just seems that this is still the Nuggets' time. They became the champions. I think they'll stay at top for another year or two before they maybe drop off due to roster management or just getting older and these younger guys come in and take their spot. And don't forget about the LA Clippers, who we'll talk about very shortly, but they are also a team on the rise. But out of all these teams, still looks like the Nuggets could be the odds-in favorites to repeat. And the fact that they can go anywhere and still play their brand of basketball is big, especially at the elite competition. These Clippers, they've looked so good after that early season run onboarding James Harden into this Ty Lue system. They've looked great. And I think they have the pieces to push the Nuggets if they were to meet them in the conference finals or any round, for the matter of fact. What they have with Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Norm Powell, and Russell Westbrook coming off the bench now, they have a unit. They know their rotations. They know the minutes they're going to play, and their chemistry has been phenomenal. They have to battle this injury bug, and that is a big if, but if they do so, I think that they would be a very tough out against the Denver Nuggets, and it would be a fantastic playoff matchup to watch. Mammoth trade last week in the NBA. The Raptors have embraced the rebuild, and they have traded Pascal Siakam to the Indiana Pacers for 3 first-round picks, some role players, and like I said, Toronto is embracing the rebuild. They traded away OG Anunoby earlier to the New York Knicks, and their other veteran piece is now over to Indiana. Clearly, this is a sign that with the younger pieces that they have, they want to rebuild and work on the future. And Pascal Siakam is really the last piece of that 2019 championship team to be part of that roster. What Indiana is getting is clearly one of the best forwards in the league. He's been a two-time All-Star, made an NBA team as well. But the thing is, it just works with what Indiana likes to run. They are a team that is one of the fastest ever. They're the quickest ever in pace, no pun intended, and rated as the best offense in NBA history. And that's because they like to get down the floor. And with Tyrese Halliburton pushing the pace with Pascal Siakam, who is the best in transition dunks, and Tyrese Halliburton is actually the first amongst the league in passes leading to dunks in transition. So when you have those two, it's a match made in heaven. Obviously, Halliburton is returning from injury sometime soon, but we definitely would like to see how these pieces come together. I'm not saying that Indiana has what it takes to challenge, but I think they will have a little bit of a boost up the Eastern Conference standings. They've been already one of the funnest teams to watch, and this now trade with Pascal Siakam will be an even funner component to the Indiana Pacers. On Tuesday, the Bucks made the strange move of firing head coach Adrian Griffin. Despite having a 30-13 record that's good for second in the Eastern Conference, things start to show up last year in December at the tail end of the in-season tournament. This year, compared to what we've seen before when they had Drew Holiday, they were one of the best teams in the league's defense. They were fourth last year. And with the trade to bring in Damian Lillard, you have to sacrifice your best on-ball defender on the wing for a decent or very good offensive piece in Damian Lillard. But he gives you nothing defensively. He never was a defensive player to begin with. And we're showing clear signs that the Bucks have regressed. Some of it has to do with coaching, but I think it's also with the players as well. They've been struggling to guard teams like the Indiana Pacers. They're just 1-4 against Indiana all year long. And they'll certainly possibly meet each other in the playoffs. And with what the Bucks have intentions of making a deep run, they will need to fix those defensive lapses, where in the semifinals of the in-season tournament, they got blown off in the fourth quarter and continued to have defensive lapses. Despite having a 30-13 record, a lot of these wins have attributed from mid to bottom tier teams in the NBA. So it's a slightly fraudulent record, and it's clear that Adrian Griffin had some issues. He was trying to work on them. They had that great performance against the Boston Celtics, but clearly he's also lost the locker room. And since the in-season tournament, Giannis came on record. He said that they look disorganized. There's a lot of things that have been coming out recently that it just seemed that management had to figure out a way to get this out of the way sooner rather than later and make it go any worse, because they're trying to maximize this title window. Giannis is still one of the top players in the league. They have Damian Lillard on a pretty long contract, so they want to maximize this window, and they'll do whatever their superstar player says and does. And after this firing became public knowledge, there were reports about there's this issue with Adrian Griffin and Giannis's younger brother, Thanasis. And Thanasis had been on the bench for the greater part of his career. He's been a minimal contributor, and I think it's really just something the Bucks just keep around just to make Giannis happy. Now this is not confirmed, but apparently Adrian Griffin criticized Thanasis countless times and even said that he is committing insurance fraud by being an NBA player. Now that is very savage, kind of funny, and oddly true as well, but you just can't say that. You know, that is your franchise centerpiece of your team, and to upset his brother and the superstar player is just a no-no. No matter how true it is, you have to hold your tongue. I don't know how true that is, but again, it's very funny nonetheless. And maybe he said that when he knew and he saw the writing on the wall that he's just not going to last the year. And with this, immediately or later that day, it turns out that Doc Rivers is going to be taking over as head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, odd move because, well, Doc Rivers has blown 3 3-1 leads, and then a 3-2 series lead last year, the Boston Celtics, and he's been broadcasting. He's been on ESPN's broadcasting staff for the better part of this year. Now that's an abrupt end, and he's going to be heading back to the bench, coaching the second best team in the Eastern Conference. It's going to be a huge test. If anything, Doc can potentially right the ship in the regular season, but again, it comes down to postseason, and we haven't seen him get past the second round in a long time. Remains to be seen whether or not he can really make adjustments, but this is a huge risk, I think. I understand firing Adrian Griffin because the defense was not up to par and he was losing the locker room, but maybe take your time. They appointed an interim head coach and he had experience already, and just maybe take some time and collect who is out there on the coaching market, but made the quick move, and now we get to see Doc Rivers be the next head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. Joel Embiid shreds Victor Wembanyama, and in their first head-to-head matchup, clearly the veteran Joel has gotten the better of the rookie. Despite Wemby's historic first year in the NBA, he still has a lot of work to do, and simply Joel put in the work and worked him for 70 points, a season high, and this is the third 70-point game we've seen in the last 13 months. Something weird is happening. Obviously, there's a trend with the whole three-pointers, but 70 points is a lot of points to get in an NBA game. But what Joel can do is proving that he is the best scorer in this league. He's up to 36 points a game, on the inside track to having his third consecutive scoring title. And I believe that what he's been doing right now, it's maybe just a different version. It's like the big man version of what we're seeing with James Harden when he was with the Houston Rockets. And if this is what we're seeing, he has seemed to have a better surrounding cast. It's just a question, can he get past the second round and take the Sixers to heights that they haven't seen in a long time. So that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. Thank you guys so much for helping us hit 100 subscribers. We are so happy to climb atop this first hill, but now we want to climb mountains. We want to conquer new territory. So you guys know what to do. Help us with that. Like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Take a look at our Instagram and TikTok pages and even playlists in here. You can get clips from this podcast on those platforms, and the whole audio from this podcast you can get on Spotify. All links are in the description. Shout out to Joey for being the best producer in this game, and thank you so much for helping us get here, but we have much more work to do if we want to be one of the best podcasts out there. So I'll catch you on the next one, but you guys know what to do. Thank you.